So thanks, it's an honor to be here. I met Tony for the first time in London a few months back on the Business for Environment event. And I was joking that I was the only business leader here in the hostile world of NGOs and policymakers. So I'm very, very glad today that I am surrounded by a lot of business people here as well. Because I think business is going to be very important to tackle the challenges that we have in climate change. I mean, to get passionate business leader that really embrace the challenges that we have in the world, and business is part of the solution, it's not a problem. You know, it's not like people graduate from high school or from university and people with a heart take a left turn, they go to Greenpeace, and people without a heart take the right turn and they go to the corporate world. I mean, that's not the situation. So let me say a few words about DSM. Let me see if this works. Okay, I'll keep that short. DSM is a global company. We're in materials and in life science. 21,000 people, financially very healthy. And we have a strategy that is very much focused around the themes in the world, one of them being the environment. So as a company, we feel that we have a tremendous responsibility to address this. This started some 10, 15 years ago from a corporate responsibility point of view, but in the meantime it has transgressed into a belief that is actually very good for business. And I will give some example of that later. I've been in the business for 26 years, and it is my belief that the challenges that we face offer tremendous value creation opportunities for business. It will be disruptive technologies, disruptive business models, but those companies that are able to embrace that and be ahead of the pack, I'm convinced there is tremendous value creation opportunities. Now, if we talk about climate change, and I'm repeating a little bit what earlier speakers said today, we tend to think about this, right? The last polar bear on the last piece of ice sheet on the Arctic. And indeed, it is true that at the moment, the speed of extinction is 100 to 1,000 times quicker than the baseline. And it is expected that in the coming 50 years, this will be increased to a factor 10,000. So we're in the sixth big extinction phase, and it's the first time in the history of the planet that this is not caused by a glacial period or by a comet hitting the Earth. So we are, as human beings, responsible for a tremendous extinction in world life. And this is bad as it is because it will have a profound impact on the food production and medicine. But as we spoke about earlier today, the biggest challenge that we have is the ability as a human race to live in this earth. And if we continue the way we do business as usual, this will not be possible anymore. I mean, you just have to travel to Beijing, or recently just live in Singapore, to know what we are doing to the environment. It is estimated that the fires in Indonesia this year will surpass the severity of 1997. In 1997, the fires in Indonesia contributed to 40% of carbon emissions in the entire world in a whole year. 2.5 gigatons of carbon was emitted in 1997. That was at that time 40% of the global emission. This year, if it gets worse than 1997, it means that the 2 or 3 months fires in Indonesia will be twice the amount that the US emits in a year and the same as China in an entire year. Just to talk about, give some examples on how severe the situation is, what we do. And I think we have a tremendous responsibility to fix this. And as was said by one of the younger speakers during lunch, that we are the first generation to have the data to prove that is because of us, and we're the last generation to be able to fix this, and we need to do that very quickly. If we were to stay within the 2 degrees limit that we now expect or accept as the maximum that we can allow the world to warm up, then we need to do it very, very quickly. Since the Industrial Revolution, the world has heated by 0.8 degrees, and it will only take 8 years before we reach 1. So we are in a tremendous speed to warm up the world, and it's very difficult to imagine. But imagine the size of Singapore, 700 square kilometers, and then imagine an ice sheet of 1 kilometer thickness. That is what is melting today every year. And that space, or that pace, is accelerating. So that is to give you some indication. 2 degrees. How bad is 2 degrees? By the way, there is a lot of scientists that say that if we reach 2 degrees, we will reach 3. Because somewhere between 1 and 2 degrees, there is a tipping point beyond which things get out of control. In the last interglacial period, the Earth was 2 degrees warmer than it is today. And I had asked Tony to make a red line on a wall here at a height of 9 meters. He came back, he said, sorry, the room is only 6 meters high. But imagine an imaginary line of 9 meters. That was the sea level being higher than today at 2 degrees. So if we talk about 2 degrees, that might seem like a very safe limit, but we need to realize that even 2 degrees will pose the world with tremendous challenges. 3 degrees, by the way, is between 15 and 25 meter sea level rise. Anyway, we as business leaders have a high responsibility. And there's going to be disruptive technologies. We talked about transportation. Think what would happen if Tesla and Uber will team up and would make the world a truly self-driving mobility world. A year ago, the CEO of Daimler said that if he would announce that he would start making phones, that Apple would not worry. So he would not worry that Apple announced to make cars. That was a year ago. A month ago, he said something very interesting. He said, we will not become the Foxconn of the automotive industry. Foxconn, as you know, is the company that produces most of the Apple products at a very low margin, so all the margin stays in Cupertino. What he said a year ago and what he said now means that he is very worried about what's going on. The technology is there to have self-driving cars. The technology is there. It's only legislation in some countries that prevents the execution of self-driving cars. And I think in one of the panels, Sophie made a remark that self-driving cars will become a reality. Well, if that is a reality, what does it mean for car companies? The way car companies deal with their business model is growth. Produce more cars every year. Actually, there is so much pressure on producing more cars every year that some companies even fabricate some software to facilitate that growth. So there is a tremendous pressure on growing each year. But if in the world we will not go from 1 billion to 2 billion cars, but from 1 billion to 500 million, disruptive technologies, disruptive business models for car companies. What we do in DSM is we measure how much money we earn with sustainability. And I think in that respect, we are maybe a little bit unique in the world. What we do is, for all the sales that we have, we measure whether that sales is in applications that have a lower carbon footprint than previous solutions. And for instance, in the business that I run until recently, a big division, engineering plastics, $1.5 billion, 50% of all the sales that we have is in applications that have a lower carbon footprint than previous solutions, making cars lighter or using less energy, etc. And the interesting thing is, on that 50% of the business, we make several percentage points higher margin. And in our business, that's a lot. That's a lot. That is in absolute terms 20 to 25% more, or in relative terms, in absolute terms 4%. So that is, I think, very, very important. In the innovation, we also measure how much of our innovation investments are in eco-friendly solutions. And Frederic, our sustainability director, is in the audience. So the number last year was, Frederic, how much? 96% of all innovation money in the engineering plastics unit and in most of DSM goes to sustainable solutions. I still remember a discussion I had with Frederic a couple of years ago when we were about to lose some business in Taiwan for a big electronic manufacturer. And I was very tempted to counteract competition and going back to an older technology that contained some older generation ingredients, less friendly for the environment, because I have a business responsibility, right? So I was very tempted to defend my business. I think, Frederic, you were the one that came to me and challenged me whether that was in line with our values and with our Eco Plus direction. So sometimes as a business leader, you need to have these choices, and it's about dilemmas. But overall, we believe that sustainability is very good for business. We prove it and we measure it. At the same time, our business models are based on carbon on cost. So what we do, we take carbon in the form of fuel, energy, or raw materials, and they are plugged into our business models as cost. What they do not do is to include social and environmental impact. And that is something that has to change. If we want to decarbonize the world, we need to have a full business picture in which not only raw material is included as a cost, but that social environmental impact is included. And DSM is taking a first step in that direction, because we have announced that as of now, for all business plans, investments, we will include a carbon tax, internal carbon tax of €50 per ton. In Europe, there is some emission trading on carbon, which is, I think, at the moment around €8 per ton. So we will add another €50 per ton to drive business decision to lower carbon solutions. Tony, over lunch, we were chit-chatting a little bit. I'm running out of time, right? Okay. So we were chit-chatting a little bit about the price of carbon. And €50, I think, is a very good start. However, if we want to decarbonize the atmosphere, and if we want to take out CO2 out of the atmosphere, out of the environment, the cost of doing that, if you're very efficient, is around $1,000 per ton. In other words, we have now, as a company, a front-runner internal tax of €50 per ton, but the cost of carbon in the environment to take it out is, depending on the technologies, current technology is probably $2,000 per ton, but they can go to $1,000 per ton. In other words, carbon is still too cheap, even at $50 per ton. And what I hope is that in the future, our behavior as consumer also will change. That our children will frown about car ownership, you know, having a car in front of your house that was produced with tremendous colon resources and carbon, which is standing 23 hours of the 24 hours idle, that people will frown upon it. Or that we throw away 1/3 of all the food that we produce in the world. 1/3 of all food produced in the world is thrown away. Food production is roughly 15% of carbon emission in the world. So if we would be able to eliminate that, we have 5% of global carbon emissions down, let alone that there is 1 billion people in the world that suffer from hunger. It's about the mentality. You know, if you order things at Amazon, it says free shipping. I mean, what do you mean with free shipping? It gives the wrong message. Shipping is not free. You can order shoes in the Netherlands. You have 10 pair of shoes delivered to your home. You like 1 pair or none, and you ship it back free of charge. So, of course, there is a cost, but the mentality is not right. I mean, you can go to a fancy bar in Singapore. Time is up. I'm almost done. Fancy bar in Singapore and order some bottled water from a glacier in Norway. right? I mean, what sense does it make? We know the ppbs of the minerals in that water. You might as well fix it here, okay? Okay, one thing on carbon. In 1947, there was a group of people meeting in Chicago at the IATA. I'm an aeronautical engineer by education, so this is the International Aviation Association. And they agreed in 1947 to not have a tax levied on air fuel because they wanted to promote aviation. Still today, the taxes on air fuel is almost zero. An A380 carries 320,000 liters of fuel, kerosene, 320,000 liters. If you would apply the same tax as the petrol for your car, that would be, in the Netherlands, 160,000 euro per flight per A380. That would change the dynamic on your holiday destinations and freight ride. So DSM and climate change, I'm wrapping up. What do? We think we need to do three things. Reduce our own carbon footprint, enable our customers and our partners to reduce their carbon footprint, and to be a strong advocate on climate action. We have measures in place, and actually 50% of the variable pay of our top leadership is linked to non-financial targets, sustainability and safety. So these are the targets that we have, and we have announced by 2025 that 50% of all energy use, electricity use, has to come from renewable resources, which is a challenge because we don't have the roadmap fully in place yet. We want to go to 150% by 2025. Another example, I am a strong believer in innovation. This is a cow. A cow emits methane, and methane is a very powerful greenhouse gas, much more powerful than carbon. We developed an enzyme to reduce the methane emission of cows by 25 to 30% and increase the yield of the meat. By the way, this is not a very sustainable animal, or eating the animal is not sustainable. Meat or beef is terribly unsustainable. And I think our children in the future might question our behavior of eating a lot of beef. One more example, advanced biofuels. We have a plant factory in Iowa where we convert the waste of corn production into biofuel. So not the corn itself, which you should use for food in my view, but the waste of corn. So, advocating climate action. We are strong advocates. Our CEO is a strong advocate. I want to be a strong advocate. I think we need passionate business leaders to embrace the cause of sustainability and make very good money with that. And I was asked by the organization to give one message that the audience should remember. And this is the message that I would like you to remember, if you remember anything from the speech. And is that business leaders have to take an enormous responsibility to anticipate disruptive technologies, disruptive business models, and to include social and environmental impact into our business decisions. And that is imperative to leave a sustainable world for the next generation. Thanks for your time, and see you later at lunch, dinner tonight. Thank you.